Viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following presentation is for educational and entertainment purposes only. What you're about to hear is the verbatim courtroom testimony from the federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs, as reported by Inner City Press. It was day 7 of the trial, and things were already spiraling into chaos when something completely unexpected happened. Joe Rogan walked through the courtroom doors. No entourage, no attorney. Just a dark gray blazer, jeans, a black notebook, and a mind full of unsettling truths. The man behind the most downloaded podcast in the world wasn't there to promote a new episode. He was there to testify, under oath. What began as speculative chatter on his show had evolved into something far more serious. Joe Rogan wasn't here to gossip. He was here with evidence, experience, and a trail of receipts that blew past internet rumors and dove headfirst into the rot beneath the surface. The moment he began speaking, it was clear. This wasn't just a celebrity trial anymore. This was the unraveling of an entire system. And Rogan had just taken the stand to pull the first thread. The courtroom was already tense when he entered. Reporters were elbow to elbow in the press gallery. Rumors were flying, but nothing prepared anyone for this. Joe Rogan, comedian, UFC commentator, and host of The Joe Rogan Experience, had just entered the courtroom as a surprise witness. This wasn't a publicity stunt, it was a full-scale intervention. Rogan approached the stand. The room fell silent. No cameras were allowed, but courtroom sketch artists scrambled to capture every moment. Diddy's legal team looked stunned. The judge asked Rogan to state his name and occupation. Joseph James Rogan, I'm the host of The Joe Rogan Experience. He didn't waste a second. I'm not here to speculate, he said. I'm here because guests on my show have given me first-hand accounts, stories that directly connect to what's happening in this courtroom. I've recorded them. I've secured the evidence. A wave of murmurs swept across the courtroom. Rogan was no longer a celebrity. He was a whistleblower. He began referencing interviews he had conducted over the years with former bodyguards, ex-label executives, and industry insiders. A lot of these people were too scared to speak off the record, Rogan said. They came to me, not because I'm a judge, but because I don't cut the tape when the truth gets uncomfortable. Then Rogan dropped his first bombshell. Back in 2023, I had a guest, part of the security team for a major A-list artist. Off-air, he told me Diddy kept files, physical evidence, videos, audio recordings, and hard drives stored on a private server in a bunker-like room at his Miami compound. The courtroom gasped. Diddy looked visibly shaken. His lawyers objected. The judge overruled. Rogan wasn't finished. That same guest told me something even darker. People like Jay-Z, LeBron James, and others didn't necessarily participate, but they knew about the so-called freak-offs. He described those events not as parties, but as rituals. Phones confiscated, guests blindfolded. And inside the industry, the term freak-off wasn't slang, it was code. A code everyone seemed to understand and accept. The prosecution asked if Rogan had brought any recordings. He nodded. I submitted audio excerpts to the DA's office before appearing. They include verified voices of unnamed insiders describing what happened at these events. Some of those voices have already been authenticated by forensic audio analysts. The judge ordered the recordings to be officially entered into evidence. Then, Rogan made the courtroom freeze. I've had Navy SEALs on my show, CIA whistleblowers, conspiracy theorists, but I've never heard anything this disturbing come from people this high up in entertainment. He looked straight at Diddy. This isn't gossip, it's systemic abuse, hiding behind platinum records and red carpet smiles. As the testimony continued, the judge permitted Rogan to recount several off-air stories he'd been told over the years. Many never aired on the podcast. Since 2018, I've been noticing a pattern, Rogan said. One of my early guests, a tour manager for a big-name R&B act, came on to discuss the usual stuff, drug culture, NDAs, pay-for-play. But during the break, he told me something else. He said Diddy's parties weren't just wild, they were dangerous. Rogan said many of these conversations never made it to air. because people were scared. One guest made me blur his voice, distort his name, and record his segment in a remote cabin. He then recounted an off-air interview from a producer who had been invited to one of Diddy's events in 2015. He told me what he saw left him shaking: hidden cameras disguised as smoke detectors, people slipping drugs into drinks, and celebrities pretending not to notice. Then Rogan opened his black notebook. "I wrote this quote down that day," he said, "and I never forgot it. I saw people being filmed against their will, and Diddy called it leverage." The judge leaned in. "Have these claims been verified?" Rogan didn't flinch. "Many were anecdotal," he said plainly, "but too many lined up to ignore. These weren't whispers in green rooms or rumors passed in hallways. These were detailed accounts, timelines, locations, people who'd never met, all describing the same set of behaviors." He explained that he kept a private archive of these unaired stories protected by NDAs he drafted alongside his legal advisors. "I didn't want to get sued into oblivion," Rogan said, "but I also didn't want this stuff buried." Then came the moment his testimony swerved into darker territory: the Jane Doe lawsuits. "I started connecting dots," Rogan said, "when names and behaviors in those suits matched what my guests had been whispering for years." At one point, he recalled a meeting from 2022. A well-known music video director had come to him, sobbing. He said he had footage, Rogan recounted, unreleased, uncensored, from one of Diddy's parties. The director claimed he'd been blackmailed into filming these events for over a decade but was too terrified to go public. "This isn't a court of opinion anymore," Rogan said, his voice steady. "This is a reckoning, and I'm here because the people who trusted me with the truth deserve to be heard, even if they're too scared to show their faces." Then Joe pivoted to a moment that had made headlines around the globe. Elon Musk's comments about Jennifer Lopez and Diddy on The Joe Rogan Experience. "It started casual," he said. "We were talking about Hollywood hypocrisy, how some celebrities scream about politics but stay dead silent when it involves people they actually know." Then Elon dropped a name: Jennifer Lopez. The courtroom leaned forward. He said she dated Diddy. She went to his parties. She knew what he was like. So why hasn't she warned anyone? Joe paused. That clip blew up, millions of views. But what stuck with me was how fast people ran to defend J.Lo instead of asking what she might be hiding. He reminded the court of the 1999 nightclub shooting, the one that sent rapper Shine to prison. "Jennifer was in the car," Rogan said, "when the gun was allegedly thrown out the window. She said Diddy didn't do it. He walked. Shine did 10 years. And Jennifer? She kept dating Diddy for 2 more years." Joe let that sit. "What does it say?" he asked. "When someone walks out of a shooting, helps protect the man arrested, and stays with him while someone else takes the fall?" Then came the gut punch. "What happens if you're only perfect for the devil?" Rogan pointed out the silence that followed Diddy's lawsuits. People loved to post about his philanthropy, but where were they when the freak-off tapes were mentioned? Where was J.Lo when Shine finally told the truth about 1999? He clarified, "I'm not saying she did anything criminal. I'm saying silence in the face of abuse is complicity. And too many people in Diddy's orbit have mastered the art of vanishing when the cameras stop rolling." Then Rogan leaned in, physically and emotionally, as he returned to the story that had haunted him for months, a story involving what one of his off-the-record guests called the bunker. "A former bodyguard who worked at Diddy's Miami compound came to me in 2022, Rogan said. "We never aired the interview. He got cold feet, but what he told me stuck." According to Rogan, the man described a reinforced vault-like basement buried under the estate, accessible only by biometric scan. Inside, he said, were dozens of encrypted hard drives. He called it the black box. Said it was Diddy's insurance policy. The room shifted. "This wasn't just footage of parties," Rogan continued. He said it was blackmail material, hidden cameras, contracts, videos, and not just of random people, of celebrities, executives, politicians. One juror reached for their water glass with a trembling hand. "The bodyguard told me he once walked in during a backup session, saw racks of servers, All air-gapped. He didn't get far. A guy with a gun told him to leave immediately. Then Rogan paused. "That's Diddy's church," the guard had said. That phrase stayed with me, Rogan admitted. Diddy's church, because whatever was in that room, it was sacred, not in a spiritual way. Sacred because it held leverage. The judge allowed the prosecution to enter Rogan's sworn affidavit containing the account into evidence. While the physical existence of the vault hadn't been independently confirmed, corroborating details from multiple podcast guests made it admissible as part of a larger behavioral pattern. Rogan then mentioned two stylists who had worked with bad boy artists, years apart, unknown to one another, yet both described a downstairs room where all the cameras faced inward. One of them said she was asked to sign an NDA in that room, Rogan noted, after noticing what looked like a disguised peephole in the mirror. "That's what chills me," he said. "Different people, different backgrounds, different years, but describing the exact same setups." Then Joe dropped one final revelation. 3 months ago, a whistleblower contacted my team anonymously, he said. Said they worked for a third-party data recovery firm in Miami. Claimed they were hired to extract encrypted video from a corrupted server. The courtroom froze. They said the footage showed guests at Diddy's events in compromising situations. I didn't air it, but I archived it, because if this trial reaches the level of federal seizure, the government might already have that drive. Joe looked directly at Diddy. "If you're innocent," he said, "then let them search the basement, open the vault, release what's in the black box." By now, the courtroom wasn't just listening. They were locked in. Joe Rogan wasn't a celebrity witness anymore. He was an informant, a messenger, a reckoning in a hoodie and blazer. "I want to talk about patterns," he said, flipping through a thick stack of handwritten notes. "Because this isn't just about parties. This is about control, fear, image, and silence." Rogan flipped through his notes, then looked up with the calm focus of someone about to light a fuse. "I've had guests on my show who hinted at things," he began, "but never had the guts to follow through. One of them was a hairstylist who worked with A-list talent. She came on to talk about fashion, trends, celebrity culture, but when the cameras stopped rolling, her tone changed. She told Rogan she left the industry not because of burnout or scandal, but because of something she saw. She said Diddy invited her to a party in the Hamptons. Seemed like your usual celebrity gathering until she was ushered into a private room and noticed something odd. A mirror that didn't reflect right. It was two-way. On the other side, someone was being filmed without knowing it." Rogan paused, letting that sink in. Then he dropped the match. "I asked her who else was there that night. She hesitated, then said a name. Jay-Z." The courtroom exhaled all at once, a collective gasp echoing off the marble walls. "She never said Jay-Z participated in anything," Rogan clarified. "But she told me he was there, multiple times, always walking through these parties like a ghost, seen, but not really seen. He never spoke, never lingered, but he was present." The implication wasn't direct guilt, it was complicity. "I've had ex-security, dancers, personal assistants, producers, they all said the same thing. Jay-Z and Diddy were like two sides of the same coin. One was loud and chaotic. The other, controlled, quiet, calculating. But the scenes, they were always the same." Rogan recalled confronting an industry insider once, asking why no one ever called it out. He laughed. Then he said, "You don't take down Puff without pulling Have down too." The prosecution seized on that line. It supported a central theme of their case. Systemic protection. Institutions looking the other way. Big names staying quiet to keep their seat at the table. "If Diddy was the fire," Rogan added, "Jay-Z was the smoke detector that never went off." Then his voice shifted. Lower, steelier. "We got warnings," Rogan said. "Anonymous emails, messages, strange calls. One of them said, 'Don't dig too deep, Joe. You'll end up like the ones who did.'" His team traced that message's IP address. It came from a firm connected to Roc Nation's PR team. The judge allowed the statement, with a cautionary instruction to the jury, but the impact had already landed. Rogan turned toward them. "Silence is a weapon. This entire machine, it's built on people shutting up, but I'm not wired that way." He flipped to the final section of his notes. "And then there are the people who were just in the wrong room at the wrong time." He brought up the infamous Manzero lawsuit, the one where a man alleged he'd been paraded around Diddy's party in a mask shaped like human anatomy. "That's not a rumor," Rogan said. "I spoke to someone who was on that yacht. He told me about a young videographer, early 20s, hired to document the event in January 2023. According to Rogan, the kid had been instructed to capture only the happy stuff, but what he saw that night followed him into his nightmares." Joe read from an anonymized transcript. There were celebrities everywhere: LeBron James, Gloria Estefan, Jay-Z, Beyonce, people smiling, dancing. But the further back you went on the yacht, the darker it got. Red-lit rooms, people restrained, a man in a mask being led around like a pet. You could hear a pin drop. The witness said he handed over his memory cards at the end of the night. Diddy's team gave him $5,000 and told him he'd get a final cut, Rogan said. He never heard from them again. What made this testimony land like a hammer was how neatly it tied into an actual civil complaint already filed in court. "You think this is just chaos," Rogan said, staring directly at the jury. "It's not. It's a system. And the scariest part? The people we idolize. They're in the rooms where it happens." He closed his notebook and delivered the final blow. "If even one of those tapes gets played in court, half this industry is finished." Then he looked directly at Diddy. "I'm not afraid of getting sued. I'm afraid of what happens if we all keep pretending this doesn't exist." Joe Rogan's voice dropped again, colder now. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. He moved from implicating celebrities to unpacking a legend that had haunted court whispers for over a year: the 2023 yacht party. "People think the yacht story is a myth," Rogan said, calmly unfolding a paper from his jacket. "It's not. It's real. And I have testimony from 2 people who were there. One was crew. The other, a guest." The room froze. Diddy's legal team leaned in toward each other, whispering fast and low. Rogan held up a letter, redacted, names blacked out. "This is from a former yacht staffer. They were hired under the assumption that it was a private shoot for a music video. VIP guests, no phones allowed, full pat-down before boarding." He paused, letting the tension tighten. But once the yacht hit international waters, everything changed. The crew was told to draw curtains. One private room was locked. Then came what the staff called the rotation. New guests ushered in every hour, always escorted, never lingering. "Some of the mirrors weren't mirrors," Rogan continued. "They were hiding cameras, framed into the walls, and some staff members were instructed to spike drinks. Not all complied, but some did." A chill swept through the gallery. Then came the second account. "The guest who came forward wasn't even supposed to be there," Joe said. "He got a last-minute invite. A favor, he thought. An industry mixer. What he walked into was something else entirely." Rogan opened a transcript and read aloud. "There was a man in a mask. People were laughing at him. I thought it was some kind of performance art, but it wasn't. Phones were out, people filming. Some of the people watching. Very, very famous." Joe let that hang for a moment before continuing. "One name came up in multiple testimonies: Gloria Estefan. Now let me be clear," he added. "No one is accusing her of participating in anything, but her name came up. Just like LeBron's, just like Beyonce's, just like Jay-Z's." The room was silent. Not a single cough, not a shuffle. And then Rogan dropped the next bomb. The guest said after the yacht docked, he was approached, offered money to forget what he saw. He refused. 2 weeks later, his apartment was broken into. The only thing taken. His external hard drives. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The court ordered the statement admitted into evidence. Joe turned to the jury, his voice steady. "People risk their lives to speak the truth. Others, they were paid to forget it." By now, Rogan's testimony had done more than raise eyebrows. It had detonated the core narrative of the trial. This wasn't about tabloid drama anymore. It was about intimidation, coercion, and the architecture of fear. "No longer are we talking about celebrity antics," he said flatly. This is about systemic intimidation, power, blackmail. He stared straight ahead. "Let's talk about leverage," he said, because what Diddy built wasn't just a party scene. It was an ecosystem of silence. Joe Rogan leaned forward, voice low but unwavering. He told the court that over the years, multiple podcast guests had pulled him aside after the cameras stopped rolling, sometimes whispering, sometimes in tears, but always describing the same chilling ritual. "You're invited to a party," he said. "You're asked to sign an NDA. You think it's standard." Then, a month later, a message arrives. "Had fun last month. Let's keep that between us." No threat, just a reminder. But the implication? A cage with no bars. Joe called it a web of invisible handcuffs. He recounted a story from a Grammy-winning producer. The man told Rogan he was offered a major career boost, festivals, features, studio access, if he deleted a clip filmed at one of Diddy's parties. He refused. Within a week, 3 venues canceled his tour. Joe also revealed he'd personally received legal letters, strategic, surgical, from PR firms warning him to stop mentioning certain individuals. He didn't name them, but the jury didn't need a map. The message was received. Then came the part that changed the temperature of the room. "A guest once told me something I can't unhear," Rogan said. He worked private security for a celebrity protection firm. According to that guest, Diddy kept what he called the rainy day file. Not a metaphor, a real folder, off-site, encrypted, backup footage, insurance. The theory is if anyone tried to take him down, he'd leak what he had on them. Joe exhaled, slower now. "One of those files, I was told, features a very powerful politician. I'm not saying the name, that's not mine to say. But if the feds have those tapes," he looked directly at the jury, "this trial is just the beginning." The judge immediately ordered that line stricken from the record. But the damage had been done. Joe closed his binder. "This wasn't fame," he said. "This was fear. He didn't just throw parties. He built a vault, and if one key turns, it all comes flooding out." As the final moments of his testimony approached, Joe did something unexpected. He stood up from the witness chair. Not prompted, not required, but necessary. "This isn't about canceling Diddy," he said. "It's about finally holding someone accountable who built an empire on silence and fear." The judge allowed a closing statement. The courtroom was still. Even the sketch artist had stopped drawing. "Over the years, I've interviewed astronauts, scientists, philosophers, comedians, ex-CIA. You learn when someone's lying. But more importantly, you learn when someone's scared." He looked out across the jury box. "And the people who've come to me about Diddy, they weren't trolls. They were insiders, industry veterans, people who shook when they spoke, people who looked over their shoulder every 10 seconds. He paused. The silence felt heavier than the testimony. "If the feds don't find the footage, the public will. Someone, somewhere, has it. And when it comes out, this courtroom will look like a warm-up act." Then Joe looked at Diddy directly. "I don't know if you started this. I don't know if you inherited it. But I know you kept it going. And now you're watching it crumble. From the inside out." The judge asked if he had anything else to add. Joe nodded. "I've said a lot on the mic. Some of it dumb, some of it funny. But this is the one time I needed every word to count. Because if even one kid out there is saved from stepping into that kind of nightmare, then all of this, every threat, every NDA, every silent producer was worth breaking." He stepped down slowly. The courtroom watched in silence as Rogan walked past the defendant's table, and for the first time in days, Diddy didn't look up.